What's up, YouTube? Capital G here, looking at this interesting regional deck that somebody placed very highly with over the weekend. This was ran by a player named Ethan Enos in Cincinnati, Ohio regionals, and my man went undefeated 8-0 with a deck that he is calling, I guess, Kozmo Kings. It's a very interesting concept, and if nothing else, it really does show that in Yu-Gi-Oh, even today, if you take a very good, solid engine, something that is consistent and has been proven to be effective, such as Cosmos, if you mix in another engine, it can be successful. A lot of times, especially if your opponent doesn't know what the hell you're doing, because I'm pretty sure a lot of times he may have opened with just a set Yashka. He said actually he did this. He's, maybe open with a set Yashka, and your opponent assumes that they're playing, that you're playing something like Shadows, and that maybe it's a Falco or a Squamata, and then they attack a Yashka, and they're like, oh crap, you know what I mean? Maybe you end up destroying the Garunix in your hand, or you end up destroying like a Slip Rider, triggering the effect and whatnot. So when I first saw he was running Fire Kings, I tried to immediately like decipher what was the synergy between Fire Kings and Cosmos, because I'm like, why would you combine these two decks of all things? Although there aren't a ton of decks right now that probably are going to work well with Cosmos, I guess Fire Kings is one of them. And I think it really is because Yashka can actually blow up the spaceships, and when Yashka blows up the ships, they do trigger. A lot of people don't even realize that if the ships are destroyed in your hand by your own card effect, or even if it's something like your opponent crush cards you and they end up hitting like a Forerunner in your hand, you can still trigger that card's effect. It's just like back in the day when you used to have a Light and Darkness in hand and your opponent used to crush card it. If you wanted to, you could activate. Well, actually, Light and Darkness Dragon isn't optional, but yeah, you could activate Light and Darkness's effect, and you could get something from the graveyard, so on and so forth. So if Yashka does die, he can still trigger this effect. He can blow up a Forerunner in his hand that might actually be dead, and then banish it and maybe get like a Farm Girl to potentially hit his opponent's life points and just kind of like search on and win the game from there. Now, I do think it was interesting that he didn't run at least one copy of Barong. I say that because he's running 2 copies of Onslaught. So I'm like, well, if you're running 2 of those, I mean, it just seems like one Barong would have been pretty decent. This card is also, it's also a pretty decent beater, and it does have synergy with Instant Fusion, which I don't think Cosmos necessarily need, because as of right now, pre Dimension of Chaos, they really only have one level 4 that they can run. So like Norden doesn't do a ton for the deck, but if you're gonna run 3 Good Witch plus 3 Yashka, then it's like, okay, now Norden is actually pretty decent. You've got 6 level 4s, you can splash in an Instant Fusion, you can splash in a Norden, now you can go into all your crazy rank 4s, you can do some legitimate plays there. So this is a really cool, interesting deck. I like the fact that he ran a Chicken Game. I think Chicken Game is just a fantastic card on the off chance that you don't open up with a Cosmo Town and maybe you don't have a Farm Girl or something like that. Chicken Game is a card where you play it, you instantly draw a card, you either force your opponent to destroy it, or you're looking at not taking any damage because you'll of course be at 7,000, your opponent will be at 8,000. So Chicken Game's kind of protecting you, and even if your opponent does destroy it, when it comes back to your turn, you get the draw. So you're always putting your opponent in kind of a tight spot. So I think this is a really interesting deck. Now, I don't think that this is going to be a deck that like spreads and becomes meta or anything like that, because the interaction with Fire Kings and Yashka, I think, is a little too linear for the deck right now. For you really to only have 7 cards that you can destroy. Now, I will say this. The one good thing about this, and it does still remind us that some of these old cards from old archetypes that used to be really, really good, just because you don't see them anymore does not mean that these cards are bad. I always look back at Judgment Dragon and I'm like, if you think Judgment Dragon's a bad card today, like, you're stupid. Judgment Dragon is still amazing. Don't think because people don't play it that it's not good. And Garunix is a card like that, and Garunix and Fire Kings actually, or Garunix and the big spaceships actually do have some synergy, because you have to remember, Forerunner and Slip Rider, they don't really care if they get destroyed. If they get destroyed, all your opponent's going to do is your opponent's just going to banish them, your opponent's just going to get another card to replace them with. Chances are, if they have Cosmo Town out, they're just going to add the cards back to their hand anyway. So if you happen to have a Garunix and you just so happen to have a Forerunner out, just because your Garunix dies, or just because your Forerunner dies, doesn't really necessarily mean your opponent actually like hurt you in any way, or doesn't mean that you're in a deficit, because chances are you're just gonna summon the Forerunner back next turn anyway. And Garunix can still be a pain in the ass for a lot of decks, especially considering things like Dimensional Prison just aren't really seeing any play anymore. You know, Dimensional Prison is starting to become less and less popular. Evac Device is starting to become less and less popular. You really don't see that card in a lot of decks, and you really don't see that many traps in a deck. So, you know, Garunix is a card where it can actually wreck a couple of matchups. Decks like Burning Abyss, they can actually kind of struggle to get around the card. Even Shadows, where Shadow's primary means of removal is like Construct, but if Construct destroys Garunix with its effect, then Garunix is just going to come back and just going to destroy Construct during the next turn. So it's like, who really gets the last laugh there? So let me know what you guys think of this deck. It's interesting and it's cool, more so just to see constant like innovation in Yu-Gi-Oh! If you guys don't think that this is innovative, like, man, I don't know what the fuck innovation even means anymore, man. If you're taking a mini engine that hasn't seen play and probably like a year and a half, that's probably about the last time somebody played Fire King. Actually, yeah, probably about a year and a half, and you're combining it with a new deck, man. If that's not innovation, I don't know what it is. So anyways, thank you guys for watching. As always, subscribing makes life happy.